Welcome back to Ireland AM. Now, we would just like to say a trigger warning because we are going to be talking about eating disorders, as today marks the start of Eating Disorder Awareness Week. This year's theme is exploring connection and community. To tell us more, we are joined by psychotherapist Denise Wogan and peer support worker William Dwyer-Joyce from Lois Bridges. Good morning to you both. Thank you so much for coming to see us this morning. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks for having us.
Denise, I didn't realise this. Eating disorders have the highest mortality rate of any mental health condition. What is the current situation like in Ireland around this?
I suppose probably, even if you think about what Bodywise has put out this week, over 5,200 people have sought support on their volunteer service. So I think the landscape is much more serious and much more prevalent. There's much more eating disorders prevalent in society at the moment. But we're not talking about it as much as we could and should. And, there are still, when it comes to access to services, we still have very few services available from the HSE. And that's why services like Lois Bridges are really helpful in providing access to care in a multidisciplinary environment for patients and clients who need that support. And the earlier we get intervention, the better the outcomes can be.
Because saying something like mortality rate for a mental health illness, and I never knew that it was in relation to eating disorders. So when it comes to seeking help, there are huge waiting lists and waiting times in order to get mental health treatment in this country. Like we can't even, we were talking about CAMS just last week. So an awful lot of time people have to go private, and that can be very hard for people to be able to do that. So there's a huge disparity between the people who are going through this and suffering and the help that they can receive.
Yeah, and I think even when you mention the word eating disorder, and sometimes people do know how complex it is, the conversation shuts down, or the language just in general community shuts down. So knowing where to access care is really important. Bodywise is great to start off, but even from ourselves, from Lois Bridges, is, you can always just phone our Director of Services. Laura is at the other end of the phone. You can send an email through. You would have an assessment with our clinical psychiatrist, who actually also is specialised in autism and ADHD. So there you would have an assessment, and we would work with you to help figure out next plans. Sometimes people might go, okay, well, does that mean I'm going to be admitted? Or, there's a lot of uncertainty about what the care can look like, but we're a holistic team. So you would work with somebody, and in the assessment, you decide whether maybe they need inpatient, but it could be outpatient, or it might be family support. So there's lots of different ways, but the model is really about a multi-team approach, and it's not one intervention or one person. But yes, from the public side, it's difficult.
William, listen, you're a peer support worker with Lois Bridges as well, but you've also gone through the eating disorder treatment as well. What was your experience?
Yeah, so I suppose from an early age, I used food as a way to kind of cope with difficult emotions. I had kind of problems, I'd say, with body image and stuff. I was always in a kind of a bigger body, but I think for a large part of that, it never even occurred to me that I'd have an eating disorder, because I'd lived in a bigger body, because I was a man. It wasn't until I was sat in front of the right psychologist when I kind of was in my early 20s, and they were like, I think food is actually at the centre of this. So that was about 10 years ago now, and I ended up at Lois Bridges, inpatient. And I suppose, it's interesting you guys talk about going private. Like, had I not had access to private health insurance, I never would have had access to, the treatment that I had, which I'm very grateful for. But it wasn't until I got to those services that I was like, oh, this is actually what I needed all along, for sure.
And William, we were talking about this before we came on. An awful lot of people would equate an eating disorder to the size that someone is.
Yes.
That's what happens. So would you have had people with perceptions going, well, sure, you can't have an eating disorder?
Oh, absolutely, yeah. I think the perception, the stereotype, is someone who is underweight. We know that the majority of people with eating disorders are not underweight, I think just perception is, well, you couldn't possibly have an eating disorder. You're plus size, or you're fat, or whatever the thing is. But I think that can prevent people from accessing care. They feel like it's their fault. They feel like they just don't want to be thin enough. They feel like, I don't know, that they failed in some way, You
mentioned that you're male as well.
Yes. I think, that's been another thing of, I think of course, women are under huge amounts of pressure in terms of how they look and what's expected societally and all of that. But I think that people don't necessarily think of men as having body image issues. On the other side of that, and the same advertising that's been targeting women for many years now is more and more being targeted at men, in terms of what they look like. And I think everyone noticed proteins and everything now. It's that thing of like needing to sort of build muscle to be okay, and I think perception is changing for sure, but we still have a little way to go.
When it comes to perception, Denise, William just said something, amazing there, that it's, are you sure you can't? That people outside their perception of this, and people who would internalise being like, oh, well, I'm just, it's my problem, it's not an eating disorder. Is that something that you see an awful lot of the time?
Absolutely. The blame, the shame, I should have tried harder, I should have known better, it's my fault. And nobody chooses to have an eating disorder. Nobody wakes up one morning and says, I'm going to turn this on now. It develops over time, and it's a complex condition that involves neurobiology, environment, identity issues, even trauma. And, I think even just to follow up on the men, we do know that 1 in 4 men have an eating disorder or potentially have an eating disorder. And when you look at binge eating disorder, that reduces down to 1 in 3. So this is far more prevalent in our society than we're thinking. And if we continue with this language of, it's a little bit of bro, I need to have the muscle and, that my body is somehow attached to my self-worth, then we continue to perpetuate the problem. Does it cause it? No, but it certainly doesn't help recovery.
William, you mentioned there that you were fortunate that you were able to go private and the treatment that you were able to get. What treatment were you able to avail of that really ticked the box for you?
I think because, before that, I had loads of therapy, and while that wasn't useless, I think it wasn't until I had proper evidence-based care in terms of dietetics, in terms of nutrition, being told, actually, I do need to eat carbohydrate. I do need to eat fat as part of a healthy, balanced diet, I think was really difficult for me to understand at the time, because I was so full on, I guess, diet culture ideals. But I think that, and also just help around my body image and, being grateful for my body. It helps me do things. I enjoy movement now in a way that I couldn't before. And just, I guess, having that piece of, it's okay. You don't have to feel the shame. You don't have to feel this guilt.
Yeah. Body image is something that we talk about a lot because of the pressures of, things we see in social media. But body positivity was a big movement for a very long time. And Denise, it seems to have changed with the kind of proliferation of GLP-1s, weight loss drugs.
Yeah.
Essentially. What do you think that's done to body image, eating disorders, people who perhaps have one? Are they being masked by use of drugs like this? What do you make of it all?
Well, I guess even when you come back to an eating disorder, it thrives in confusion. And here we are again. So body image is age old. I remember when I studied the history of it, it goes back to hundreds of years ago. But it changes, and if you study the trends, we'll be skinny for a while and then it'll be a bigger body, and you're left with the people inside who are trying to live and function, and their body is 1 minute it's okay and the next minute it's not okay. I need to have bigger muscle. Oh no, hang on a minute, we need to be more like the Kate Moss, skinny was never felt as good as this. And again, it all comes back to the belief system. So what we think and feel, that's what body image is, what we think and feel about ourselves. And if that's tied to our appearance, we forget the other amazing parts of us. We forget the person who can write because they've got amazing access to creativity. You forget how somebody can move in the body that they're in. And that's, I suppose, the damage or the concern that we would think for the future generations, that they're so tied to how their body looks.
Well, William, from your point of view, listen, there's so many messages out there for so many people who are watching, but today it's about exploring connection and community. As a peer support worker, how important is community?
I think it's absolutely one of the most important things. I think, in mental health spaces, we're often kind of told to kind of work on ourselves. It's all kind of us to work on as individuals, whereas we're social creatures. We all need connection. We all need a space where we can talk about these things, but also just like have the crack and a bit of, you know, like break from our heads as well, you know, like it's so important.
But William, if someone was at home now and they think that someone that they love is going through something, a form of an eating disorder, how do you think that they could perhaps bring that up? Because an awful lot of this is internalised. You're going through this yourself and beating yourself up. So what could a loved one do? Could they mention it, or is it?
I think, yes, I think there are ways of mentioning it. Like, for sure, no comments on body, I would say. You know, it would maybe be more like, you know, I noticed that you're feeling a bit isolated maybe, you're not as happy as you once were, you know, as opposed to sort of saying like, maybe you've gained weight, maybe you've lost weight, we're worried about you, to just bringing it back to feelings, you know, we're worried about you, you know, we see that you're acting kind of differently, we're not sure you're as happy as you once were, you know.
Yeah, is that it? Would that be the clinical sort of?
Yeah, and I would even say for any professional out there, rather than asking a person, what do you eat? What is your relationship with food like? How do you feel about your eating? And if, you know, a person might say something like, you know, I feel like a bit of shame, then that's your cue to say, okay, well, maybe I'm not the best person to work for you, and refer them on to the right people and the right avenue of support.
If you do want any support, you can go to virginmedia.ie/helplines for all of this. Denise Wogan, psychotherapist, and William Dwyer-Joyce, peer support worker. Thank you both so much for being here and talking to us about this today. We really appreciate it.
Well done, of course. This Eating Disorder Awareness Week. So do try and get as much, I suppose, support in that as well. Right time.